Hi friends, welcome back. This session we will see file IO, mainly with the plain text and the CSV files and a very important file called as the config file. Config file can be used to store properties that is used across your application or code or modules. Could be paths, database properties, usernames, URLs, etc. So we start here with a config file reading. We will use a module called config parser. So we are going to import the module and then use it read the config files. Here we are creating a function called readConfig and call it from our main program as we have learned in our previous session. Here the config file, we will call it as myconfig.ini, which is stored in the D drive. So we will specify that config.read the location of the file, which is called the config file. So we should actually initialize the variable config file to myconfig.ini. There is another way in which we pass the config file as a variable to the function through the main program. We will also see and try it later. So once we have read the config, we have to return it back to the calling function. We will call this trainingutils.py. So all the sub functions or the functions we write, which will be called by the main program, we will store in this utility file. Now let us see how the config file looks like. It has a section called files with three properties: text files, CSV file and an Excel file. So we'll call it as plain file. So each of these will point to the location where the files are located. So plain file is in plain.txt, CSV file CSV file.txt, and so on and so forth. So we are going to specify these properties now. Excel file is equal to. So you could have multiple sections, each having a property. One section for files, one section for URLs, one section for databases, one section for username, so on and so forth. So you can read it at runtime. So tomorrow if you have to deploy something across environments, all that you have to do is change the config files to the environment specific properties and the same code will start working. So this is the use of the config file. So now after we have read, we have to return what is the config that has been read. So the function will return the config. Now let's go and write a main program, which we'll call this function. So it's similar to what we did last time. From training util, import that function, that is readConfig. Now let's see what it has read. So we are going to print each of those properties. The three properties were plain text, plain file, CSV file and Excel file. So now the config is kind of a two-dimensional array. You can call it that way, where I'll say config of files and then plain file. So similarly for the rest, it will be Excel file and files, Excel file and file CSV file. So now we have read the config and printed them. Now there is another option. What do? I pass the config file itself into a function, and while calling the function read config, I'll pass the config file. This it makes it more flexible. So I'll just call this function passing the path. So it is going to read that config file. Now we will go and see how to read and write into a plain file. So there we are going to use the function open. So we are going to create a file handle, open the file name. Here what is the file name? Yeah, plain file, and we will put it in read mode. R is the read mode. File.read, and then we are going to print the contents, whatever it is there in that. Let's run. Yes, you got an error. Okay, because first thing is we have not defined the plain file. So we have to define the variable plain file. So let's see how do you define the variable that is obtained from a config file. So I'll say config file plain file. So that takes care of that. Now there is another error. It says no such file or directory because plain file.txt does not exist in your D colon. Let's not create it. Let's see the write function and try to create the file. So W is for writing a file. Now we are writing a file, so it will change. We'll say file.write whatever you want to write. Let's say para1. And then you saw the file.close. So it's very important to close the handle every time you open it when you mention this specifically. Now we will read it. So we'll make it R file.read. So it has printed para1. This is W is a overwrite mode. So if you run the program n number of times, it will still print the same data. Now if you want to append, now you have added A, so it's append mode and it has appended it, but it's appending to the same line. So if you want it to be in a different line, you have to specifically give the /n. So now if you run the program, you will see there is an extra line added in the end. So the next time you run, the para will come in the next line. So that's how it works. So you have seen how to read it and how to write to the file. Now there's another way of reading it. We can say read lines. So now you see the read lines returns a list instead of just printing one below the other. So this can be actually used to manipulate each line. So when we do processing with natural language, or you want to do something on the lines, do modify things, find out, so that time read lines will be used. So this is how you read and write your and append to your plain files. Okay, now you can on your own try with the A plus and the W plus modes. There are other modes available as A plus and W plus. You can try them out yourself and see how they differ from A and W. Next we will work with the CSV files. So we will take the same approach with the CSV also. We will first see how to write and then we will see how to read the files. So first we are going to set the variable CSV file is equal to config of file CSV file, so that it picks that corresponding file. Now we are going to use something called the module CSV. So we are going to import the module CSV, and the way we open the file also we will look at a different way of working with the file. We are not going to say file is equal to open file CSV blah blah blah. Instead we are going to use a with option or the with block. So with open CSV file in write mode, yes. So we are first opening the file. We have to give it a name. So now the handle is assigned in a different way with open file, so on and so forth. So we are writing it. We have to specify what is the new line character. So we are assigning the handle to the variable work file. Earlier it was file is equal to open something. So now it's basically work file is equal to open something. So that's the way, but it's just a different way of doing the same operations. So now I'll say data writer is equal to csv.writer working file, comma, delimiter. Since it's a CSV, we will give a comma as the delimiter, or you could use semicolon or space or tab or whatever. So for us, since to make later on when we open it using the spreadsheet software, we should be able to see it. So we are giving a comma there. Let's write it now. So the handle is data writer dot write row. So you are writing a row. So let's write a row, column 1 row 1, column 2 row 1, and column 3 row 1. So there will be 3. So this will be again a list which we will be giving. Now let's write another row, row 2, yeah, row column 2 row 2, column 3 row 2. So we are writing 2 rows. Okay, so now it would have created the file. Let's see. So that it has created a CSV file .csv. Let's see the contents. First let's open it with a notepad. So here you see it's created as now let's open with the spreadsheet software and see how it looks. So this is how it looks in your spreadsheet software. So now let's go back and see how it prints. Now let's put a read statement and print what we have read. We will use again the with open. So instead of W you have R, rest remains the same. CSV.writer will become CSV.reader. Now we loop through the data reader. So for row in data reader, print row, and then it's going to basically print it. So it's writing. Now if we just want the first element, we can put as row of 0. If we want the second, row of 1. If we want the third, row of 2. Now there is a practical problem in working like this, because you can have n number of rows. So it becomes very difficult to read and write. So other option is we read the CSV as a dictionary rather than a plain file, so that you will have the headers and then you can read the headers. Using the headers you can read the values in the columns. Writer becomes dictionary writer. So you are going to now write instead of, now we need to add the headings as well. So a headings is nothing but again another list. Let's call head 1, head 2, head 3. So these will be the keys for the dictionary. The headings will be the keys, where the actual data will be the values. Now we have to say what is the heading. So data writer, csv.dictwriter, the file, and field names will be headings. So now we are assigning the values to each of those. So head 1 will be column 1, row 1 is the value, head 2, column 2, row 1, similarly head 3. So similarly we will put another line which will be basically row 2, or in this case it will be row 3, because row 1 will be the heading. Now first we will reuse the same read and see how the output comes. We will make the row of 0 as just row and see how the output is coming. Now to get the header, or to add the header, we are going to add data writer dot write header. So that is going to add the headings list into the file as the headers. Now the header also comes. But if you are directly printing, header comes as just the row, 0th row. So if we want to use it as a dictionary, read it as a dictionary, we have to do a dictionary reader. So we have read. Now row will have a key value pair. So this is how the dictionary looks like, with a key value pair head 1, head 2, head 3. Now while printing you can say row of head 1, row of head 2, row of head 3. So now you can actually get the values by the column you need. So when there is lot of columns in a big Excel or a CSV file, using dictionary helps. You don't have to remember, go and check every time what is the column name or the column number, which can change with every input or which can change with every file. So using a dictionary makes it easier. So now you have seen how do you work with config and plain text file and the CSV files. Next we will see how to work with Excel. We are going to use a module called pandas, and then how do we work with graphs. Okay, how do you plot graphs in Python.